My name is Amelia Rose, and I am 24 years old. I never thought I would sit down one day and tell the story of my life, the story of endless rejections, heartbreaks, and the constant feeling that I never truly belonged anywhere. I grew up in a small town in England, in a street where every house looked the same. Neat gardens, white fences, and doors that always seemed to close in my face. My father left when I was 10, and my mother raised me alone. She worked long shifts as a nurse, leaving me to face the world mostly by myself. As a child, I was different. I was shy, awkward, and I never really fit in with the other kids. While the girls next door played dress-up together, I sat alone with my books. While the boys rode their bicycles in groups, I walked quietly on the sidewalk, pretending not to care. But deep down, I did care. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be invited in. But I wasn't. The first rejection came when I was 12. Our neighbor, Mrs. Harlow, hosted a birthday party for her daughter, Lily. Every child on the street was invited except me. I watched from my bedroom window as balloons were tied to their gate, music filled the air, and laughter spilled into the evening. I sat there with tears rolling down my cheeks, wondering why my house was always left out. It didn't stop there. In high school, it was the same story. Friends came and went, but no one ever stayed. Whenever there were group projects or sleepovers, somehow, I was always the last one chosen or not chosen at all. Teachers told me I was too quiet, classmates called me strange, and neighbors treated me like I was invisible. Every house rejected me. I still remember one winter evening when I gathered enough courage to knock on the door of the Morgan family across the street. Their daughter, Emily, was in my class, and I thought maybe she could be my friend. I carried a plate of cookies my mother had baked, my hands trembling from the cold and from fear. When Mrs. Morgan opened the door, she smiled politely but firmly said, "Oh, Amelia, thank you, but Emily is busy. Maybe another time." I could see behind her Emily laughing with two other girls. They weren't busy. They just didn't want me. That night, I lay awake in bed and whispered to myself, why am I always the one left out? As I grew older, the rejections continued, but they started to hurt differently. It wasn't about birthday parties anymore, it was about life itself. Job interviews where they told me I wasn't the right fit. Relationships where men said I was too much or not enough. Even when I thought I found love, it slipped away, leaving me lonelier than before. At 22, I fell deeply in love with a man named Daniel Carter. He was charming, confident, and everything I thought I could never have. For a while, I believed I was finally chosen, that someone finally wanted me. But I was wrong. One day, he simply said, "Amelia, you're sweet, but I don't see a future with you." And just like that, he left, choosing someone else. Rejection followed me everywhere. I tried to build a career. I applied to countless companies, prepared carefully for interviews, dressed in my best clothes, and carried hope in my heart. Yet, rejection letters filled my inbox. Each one felt like another door slammed shut in my face. By the time I turned 24, I began to believe that maybe there was something wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't meant to be accepted. Maybe I wasn't meant to belong anywhere. But little did I know, life was about to change in ways I could never imagine. Life has a way of testing people like me, those who are already broken in quiet, invisible ways. I often wondered if there was a curse written in my name. Why did every house close its doors to me? Why did every person choose someone else instead of me? I carried those questions into my 24th year like heavy stones tied to my chest. One rainy evening, I was walking home from another failed interview. My shoes were soaked, my hair plastered against my face, and my heart numb from hearing the words, "We'll get back to you." I knew what that meant. It meant another rejection letter. Another no. Another reminder that I was never good enough. As I passed by the rows of houses, their warm lights glowing through the windows, I felt an ache so deep I thought it would consume me. Inside those houses, families were laughing, couples were holding hands, and friends were gathered around tables. And there I was outside, walking alone, the outsider in every story. But something happened that night. I reached a little bookstore at the corner of the street. The lights were dim, and the sign above the door read Whitmore Books. I had walked past it many times but never gone inside. Something pulled me toward it that night. Maybe it was the rain, or maybe it was the desperation in my heart. When I opened the door, the smell of old paper and ink greeted me. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with stories of people who lived, loved, and mattered. For the first time in years, I didn't feel judged. Books didn't reject people. Stories welcomed anyone willing to read them. Behind the counter stood an elderly man with kind eyes and silver hair. He looked up from his book and smiled. "First time here?" he asked. I nodded nervously. "Well then, welcome," he said. "This place has a story for everyone. Maybe you'll find yours." I didn't know it then, but that little bookstore would change everything. I began visiting Whitmore Books regularly. At first, it was just a place to escape. But slowly, it became more. The old man, Mr. Whitmore, treated me with kindness I hadn't felt in years. He listened when I spoke, laughed at my silly remarks, and always encouraged me to read more, to write more, to believe more. "You carry so many untold stories inside you, Amelia," he once told me. "Don't let rejection silence them." Those words sank deep into my heart. For the first time, I began to write. I wrote about my childhood, about the birthday parties I was never invited to, about the doors that closed in my face, about Daniel leaving me, about job interviews that ended with disappointment. I poured my pain onto paper, and somehow, it started to feel lighter. But life, as always, wasn't done testing me. When my mother fell ill, I had to take on more responsibility. Hospital visits drained me emotionally and financially. Relatives who promised support never showed up. Friends disappeared, neighbors whispered but didn't knock on our door. Once again, every house rejected me. One evening, I sat in the hospital corridor, my hands shaking as I prayed for my mother. Daniel passed by with his fiancée. He glanced at me, smiled politely, and walked on. My heart broke all over again. I was invisible to him now, just as I was to everyone else. But then something unexpected happened. One day, while I was writing at Whitmore Books, a young woman entered. Her name was Clara Bennett. She was lively, confident, and unlike anyone I had ever met. She noticed me scribbling in my notebook and asked, "What are you writing?" At first, I hesitated. But then I told her my story, my rejections, my loneliness, my pain. She didn't laugh. She didn't judge. She listened. Really listened. And when I finished, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Amelia, that's not just a story. That's strength. People need to hear this." Her words lit a spark inside me. With Clara's encouragement, I began shaping my writings into a manuscript. Mr. Whitmore supported me, guiding me through the process. Days turned into nights as I poured every wound, every rejection, every closed door into those pages. Months later, my book "Every House Rejected Me" was published. I never expected it to mean anything. But somehow, it did. People read it. People connected to it. Letters poured in from strangers who said they, too, felt rejected, abandoned, or invisible. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't alone. For the first time, I wasn't the only outsider. And then something beautiful happened. One evening, as I walked through the same street that once haunted me, I noticed lights flickering in the houses. But this time, the doors weren't closed. Mrs. Harlow, the neighbor who once ignored me, stopped me at the gate and said, "Amelia, I read your book. It touched me deeply. I wish I had known your pain earlier. You're always welcome here." The Morgans, who once turned me away, invited me for tea. Emily apologized, tears in her eyes. Even people from my past who had once dismissed me began reaching out. For the first time in 24 years, doors began to open. I realized then that rejection had shaped me, but it didn't define me. Every no I heard, every door that closed, every house that rejected me, it all led me here. To finding my voice. To finding people who truly saw me. To becoming someone who could turn pain into purpose. Today, when I walk down my street, I don't feel like an outsider anymore. I feel like someone who finally belongs, not because people let me in, but because I let myself in first. And if you're listening to my story right now, I want you to know this: rejection does not mean you are unworthy. Sometimes, rejection is simply redirection, guiding you toward where you're truly meant to be. Because even though every house rejected me, in the end, I built my own. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon.